And what Lanier offers is, these fish and the bait fish will relate to these offshore brush piles. And if you know where they are, you can pull up onto that structure and keep yourself about a cast away and make a cast over that brush pile and bring wolf packs of spotted bass up that will literally fight over your topwater bait. And it's the most incredible, energizing, just awesome experience. What I really became to appreciate now is watching the look on other people's faces that have no idea, why are we fishing in the middle of the lake? What's going to happen? You're out of your mind.
And when the water blows up.
Yeah. And there's a wolf pack of them, and they're fighting over it, and they're knocking it out of the water and chasing it going on. It's so exciting. And like I say, the look on people's faces is just amazing.
Hey guys, this is Danny Pruitt with Fish North Georgia, and welcome to our first ever video podcast. Today I had the pleasure of sitting down with Jim Mathley, better known as Jimbo, from Jimbo and Lanier's Guide Service. Jimbo specializes in putting his clients on Lake Lanier spotted bass. Today he shares with me some of his tactics that he uses in targeting these fish over offshore structure, such as topwater, flukes, spy baits. He also tells me about how he jumped from corporate America to becoming a full-time fishing guide. I hope you enjoy watching this as much as I did recording it. So let's get started. Man, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. This is awesome. Thank you for having me today.
Well, I appreciate you traveling out to the sticks,
Absolutely.
to see us. I know it's a long drive, and I know the weather is not the best. It's a little windy, a little chilly outside.
The wind was blowing the truck around on the way out here. I almost hit 5 or 6 deer and drove in the ditch a couple times, but I made it. I'm here. I'm grateful to be here.
We appreciate you taking the time to come out here to do this. So,
Indeed.
As custom, I'm going to let you have a little chance to tell everybody a little bit about yourself, kind of where you've come from and how you got here, and then we will get into the meat and potatoes section, all the questions. But I want everybody to know, who is Jimbo?
Got it. I love that. Well, thank you for providing that opportunity. Again, thanks to you and Josh for having me up here. I'm grateful for the opportunity. But I started my career in fishing, if you will. It really wasn't a career at the time, but my dad would take me crappie fishing when I was a kid. I grew up in Indiana, so I'm a Yankee. Everybody kind of knows that.
I was going to bring that up. You're my first Yankee podcast.
Yeah. I've tried to transform my ways, but there's still that Yankee in me a little bit. It's still there, but I try to really push it down so it doesn't come out too often. But so I grew up in Indiana, and my dad would take me crappie fishing. Crappie down here, so we'd call it crappie in Indiana. That's a big difference. And we go to a local place, Geist Reservoir, and I just really loved it. I remember those mornings. I can still remember Dad getting up and cooking breakfast for us at like 4 a.m. and then we're going and renting a John boat and putting the old 5.5 horse Johnson on the back, and just the memories of that experience were just incredible to me, and it's really stuck with me my whole life. It is amazing doing that. I was probably I'm going to guess 6 or 7 years old when he took me on my first trip, and we went on several during the course of my childhood, but those moments were truly unforgettable. It made such an impression on me, that time, that just father-son time, but also, the catches that we had. And he didn't really know anything about bass fishing. He had heard about bass fishing. Some of his friends bass fished. So I really didn't get introduced to bass fishing through him, but he certainly introduced to me the love of fishing, and it really took hold. But I went on to college. After that, I studied at Purdue University, got a degree in hospitality management. So I was, when I got out of school, I hadn't fished in probably, I grew up fishing with Dad, and I do my own fishing in the creeks and streams and things around Indiana and the little lakes and ponds and stuff. But I didn't really do any serious fishing until after college. So when I got out of college, I went to, I lived in Northern Virginia. I moved to Northern Virginia, took a job in the hotel business. I stayed focused on sales and marketing. Hadn't touched fishing in several years. And the place that my wife and I lived, we got married in December of 1990, and I'd already lived out in Northern Virginia for a few years. But the place my wife and I lived was a big apartment complex. They're close to Fort Belvoir for anybody that's from that Virginia area. We were, again, Northern Virginia, pretty close to D.C., and my neighbor across the street was from Kentucky, or I say across the street, across the hall, was from Kentucky, and he was a bass fisherman. So he convinced me at that time to go down to the local pond, if you will. It's not really a pond; it was a reservoir. It was called Fountainhead Regional Park. It was the Occoquan Reservoir. We'd launched there at Fountainhead. We rented a boat, put on trolling motors on the back of the John boat, and we went bass fishing. It was my first time of ever fully, truly bass fishing. So he taught me some of the ropes about, we were still throwing Zebco 33s maybe at the time, and I think he introduced me to spinning rods and how to throw a spinning rod. I remember I couldn't control the distance with the bait. It was difficult to control the distance, but we fished floating Rapala minnows. Mm-hmm. And those floating Rapala minnows, I'd throw those things out, and of course it was so misdirected, and we even had, we'd hook each other, and I remember having to pull hooks out of him, and the hooks one time came out of him and into my arm, and I was off the emergency room. It was crazy. It was all, around a bait or whatever. Anyway, stories from the past, but that's where I really started bass fishing. And I remember my first, big bass. To me, it was a big bass. It was probably only 2.5 or 3 pounds, but I threw that floating Rapala next to a log, twisted a little bit, floated to the surface, and a bass came up, rolled on it. And I think, pun intended here, I was hooked from then on.
Right.
That was it. I mean, I was into bass fishing. I loved it. And pursued it recreationally, throughout my entire course of my hospitality career. I was 20 years in hospitality. Again, it's focused on sales and marketing. The last permanent position I held was a regional director of sales and marketing for Wyndham Hotels and Resorts. I was based in D.C., took a promotion to come down to Atlanta in 2005. 10 months after we moved here, moved the whole family from, where we'd lived for 15 years. I've got 3 daughters, and I'll talk a little bit about them. But we moved down here, and 10 months after we did so, the company was sold. So I was out. I mean, I was severanced out. I didn't really have much of a plan. I was still recreationally bass fishing. I did tournaments and, all sorts of different things as I kind of grew in the sport. But I really hadn't considered at that point that I was going to be an angler, a professional angler, if you will, and be a guide. So I started consulting, and I started traveling to do consulting work for different firms that needed coaching, counseling, directing in terms of shifting hotels that were either renovating, going through a brand change, had a leadership change, needed stabilization in the revenue flow arena. So I would go and I would spend time with these guys and help them, coach them, guide them, do what I needed to do to stabilize the ship or to coach them through, like I say, renovation, rebranding, et cetera. And my travels took me anywhere from, Palm Springs, California. I had a 2-year contract in Palm Springs. I was in London for 3 months working on a project. I was in Houston, Texas. I was in Orlando. I was in Santa Fe. I was traveling all over the country and, even into Europe and missing my kids grow up. I've got 3 daughters. They're aged 21, 18, and 16 now. But at the time, this was in 2000, probably 2006 to 2009, I was on the road constantly. Back home maybe once every 2 or 3 weeks for 3 or 4 days, and that was it. So the fishing took a hit. I really wasn't fishing at all during that period after I lost that big job with Wyndham. And I was traveling, and I was out chasing a paycheck, and it was going well. The money was great. I mean, the money was awesome, but it was just like it was empty. It just really wasn't. It wasn't providing me happiness and all. It wasn't providing our family happiness, and it just wasn't right. So I made the decision at one point just to take a position to get off the road and get back home. I took a position that was probably 3 steps back in my career, if you would, but it was something that got me sleeping in my own bed every night. So
right.
So I did that just to get off the road. The salary was decent. It wasn't what I was making traveling, but I was home, and I was really happy about that. The position wasn't right, and God kept. This was really a God thing. He had a plan for me, and I didn't know what that plan was, and I was not open to that. It was so clear as I look back that he had something prepared for me. He had something that would really just strike me a light with every day, that I would have that unbelievable just excitement every day when I got up to go do this stuff. And I didn't know it. I kept closing the door on it, thinking, well, I've got to be in the hotel business. I got to be in the hotel business. I got, this is what I've learned. This is what I do. And I was so close-minded. But he just kept closing doors. Every time something that I would do in the hotel business at that time, whether it be a consulting job or this road, he kept closing those doors. He kept closing those doors and saying, this is not it, not it. And I'm so frustrated, and it was a very stressful and difficult time for our family. But for whatever reason, one time after I was dismissed from that job, I only had about 4 months, and thank God I was dismissed. Oh, I mean that so sincerely. Thank God I was released from that job, because it was awful, but it was so good. I'm so thankful for getting fired from that job, because it made me go the direction God had in mind for me.
Yeah, we call that grace.
That is grace.
That
Absolutely.
is grace.
100% grace, and there's not a day that goes by that I'm not thankful for that moment. But
that's awesome.
So anyway, that's when I decided, this was in late 2009, that I decided that I was going to be a guide. It all started, we had a yard sale. I lived in Alpharetta at the time, and I was still in what I call my corporate house in Alpharetta, and in a lifestyle that I really thought I wanted, but I really never did. And it just wasn't fulfilling. It didn't provide the fulfillment that I enjoy now and what I do now. So I had a guy, I had my boat parked in the yard illegally. The HOA really didn't like that at all. But I had the boat parked in the yard, and a guy came up for the yard sale and said, hey, how much you charge me to take me fishing? And I don't know, I think I charged him $100 or something, took him out, caught fish. And I said, I could do this. This is a way that gets me into what I love to do, and it's a way that allows me potentially to get paid for what I do, what I love to do, and this is a life change, and I really want to do this. So, I've kind of lined up all my T's and crossed them and dotted the I's, and go to my wife and say, look, I'm going to be a professional, and I'm going to be a fishing guide on Lake Lanier. And her response to me was this: well, that's great, honey. I think I'll just go be a professional sports model or swimsuit model. So
right,
she said,
right.
I'll be a professional swimsuit model. We'll see how that works out for us. So if you can't detect this over the podcast here, that was sarcasm. That was complete sarcasm.
Right.
So she was obviously not in favor of this. And so that created even more angst. After having losing jobs and challenge being away, our relationship had suffered as a marriage, just because I'd been away for so long, and we weren't connected like we should be connected as, what God intended for a marriage to be. We just weren't connected at that time. And now there's like, oh, great, this guy's going to provide for me by taking people. And she said this, she's like, people aren't going to pay you to carry them fishing. That's not going to happen. And she didn't say it with that accent, but still,
right.
that was the thought process.
Right.
She's like, this is not going to happen. So
she probably has no idea how much money is spent on the industry.
Yeah. She had no clue. Like anybody that's not involved in fishing doesn't get it.
Right.
They don't understand what this is about. It's just like any niche thing that people do. Like, if we were to go out, I don't know what a good example would be, but I know there's video game. I don't play video games, but that's a multi-billion-dollar market, right? Mm-hmm. I don't sit in front of the TV and play video games, but there's a lot of people that do, and that's that's just one of those things. Like, you just have no concept of how big it is and how much money is spent on it until you really get into it and start diving into it, right?
Exactly.
So if you're not in it, you're not in it, and you don't get it. And that's really the way it was with her. And quite honestly, it was just me going, man, I want to go fish for a living. I want to fish all the time. This is what I want to do. So eventually, I say eventually, it's probably a month and a half or 2 months. We were going back and forth on this and talking about this, and she'd suggest other things. Well, have you looked at this job or that job or whatever? I said, no, honey, I'm going to be a fishing guide. I'm going to be a fishing guide. So again, more unrest in the family. And then from that point, we were really at odds, and it was a very tense time in our relationship and our marriage. She came to me one morning. I was getting up to go do something, and it might have been to go to fish or to be with somebody to talk about fishing or something. It was something fishing related, it was something job related, but I hadn't really opened, quote unquote, my business yet. And she said, she came to me, she was in tears. I'll never forget this, the most moving moment probably in my life, aside from the birth of my children, is she came to me with a little note card. And she had written on it, it was Psalms 37:5. She said, I haven't slept all night. I've been praying on this. And when I just when I got out of bed this morning, this verse was just screaming in my head. It was tattooed in my brain. And I'm going to paraphrase. I don't remember exactly what 37:5 says, but it's like, trust this onto the Lord, and he will deliver this to you. And she handed me the card, and I'll get emotional talking, but she handed me the card, and she said, go live your dream. Do it. Go be a guide. I support you 100%. And I'll tell you, we have not looked back one time. Not one time from that did we look back. It was full-on commitment. We believed, we committed, and we did it. And together, I mean, she's such a support in this. My wife is such a support in this. She's awesome. She supports me in everything that I do. She's done so much in raising our kids, and it's just been awesome to see what that partnership is. So we started rebuilding our marriage. I started building my business. Not that our marriage was what I call on the rocks. We're just disconnected. We just weren't. We had been apart for so long that we really had not been living the same lives. But we started rebuilding us. We started building this business, and I got more faith with every and more belief with every trip that I booked that I could do this, I could do this, I could do this. And I just never gave up. I mean, I just literally never gave up. And I said, I'm going to do this till it works, you know? And, you know, I listen to a lot of podcasts. We're talking about podcasts. I listen to a lot of podcasts, motivational speakers, business speakers, different people. Andy Stanley podcast, his leadership. He's got a wonderful leadership podcast. I listen to these things and I'm inspired by these things. And at that time, it was one of those inspirational moments that we're just going to keep going, man. We can do this, and every inspirational thing that happened or every success that we tasted, it just made it better and better and better. And, you know, Jimbo's has grown into a brand that I think is pretty well recognized, and certainly it's something that I enjoy the relationships that I've developed, just like you guys here, you and Josh here, and you know, just being able to know people, see people, be involved in this business, support other people. Like I was just down at Pam's house for Georgia Blade. You know, she and I were working on some projects together, and I stopped in there and saw their shop and everything. But it's just those kind of people that you're connected with on a day-to-day basis is what makes this business so great. So I've been so blessed, so richly blessed to get to where I am today from where I was. And now I look back and I see all those doors that God opened, and some of the roadblocks, not that he put there, but he helped me get through, and it has been just an amazing journey, and it's just so awesome to sit here and reflect on it with you guys and, you know, to talk about this. So real briefly to end my bio section, and I know I've rattled on for a long time here,
but keep going.
But I just want to talk about my family a little bit, which is really, you know, aside from my relationship with God, next is my family. And my family is my wife, Gina, and I've got three beautiful daughters. Kira's 21, Hannah is 18, and my youngest, Olivia, is 16. So I'm going to start from the back and work up. Olivia right now is in Africa as we tape this podcast. She's in Africa on a mission trip. She has a heart for the mission field and has a heart for the Lord, and is out, you know, winning souls for God in Africa. So proud of her. It's amazing what she has done in her young life. And she really kind of followed in the footsteps of her older two sisters who both did mission trips. Kira, my oldest, who's 21, and Hannah, 18. They both have been on mission trips to India. Kira's been to Africa. You know, going back to Olivia, she's been to Mexico and Guatemala. You know, they have spent their time growing up in church, plugged into church, and part of church organizations, small groups, great leaders, other men and women have poured into these kids, and they've really, it's just amazing that they've got what I want for them, which is that I can do it attitude. We can together, we can get this done. I have my faith, and I know that can take me wherever I want to go, and that they know that they've got that base. So my older two just recently moved out to Hawaii. My middle child is enrolled at University of Hawaii, Manoa, as a freshman in marine biology. She's studying marine biology, wants to be a marine biologist. And my older child, Kira, had moved out there with her. Now, they live separately. They don't live together, but they live close together, and she's pursuing her photography career. She had started her photography business here, and she's growing and pursuing her photography career out there. And it's amazing to see the way she develops and has faith in herself. And it's like all these struggles that Gina and I went through, as I shared briefly with you about, you know, coming into this this guide business and where I'd been and where am I going and how can this all work. They've got that faith, and I think that God has blessed them with that. They have that faith to go out and start a new adventure. They've got the faith, and they've got the confidence that we can move 5,000 miles away at this age and do what we need to do. We can get it done out here, and that's a proud moment as a dad and as parents. Gina and I are just, so overwhelmed with where our kids. It was like we pulled up on the phone the other day. Like she's got a "Where are you?" app. She's still mom, right? So she's she's following. She's like, "Hey, honey, look at this. This is where all our kids are right now." She pulled up a global map that was on her phone, and it was pinging one kid in Africa, us at home in Georgia, and the other two out in Hawaii. It's like, look at them. We've got them, spread out over 10,000 miles.
Got the whole earth covered.
Yeah, they got the whole earth covered, pole to pole, coast to coast. But anyway, it's just that's a really gratifying thing as parents that we've been able to raise kids that are true to the Lord. They have faith in the Lord, and they also have faith in themselves as a result of that, and are not afraid to go out and tackle life and make it what they want it to be and be happy. And that's really what it's about. So this business has been a great role model, if you will, to them. It's been a great way for them to see, hey, this can be done. You can do it on your own. It doesn't have to be for somebody else. It can be your own thing, and they're happy to go do that, and it's just awesome to see it. So.
No, that's awesome. We can just stop recording right now. That was worth everything just to hear that right there. So, it's funny you mentioned Pam over at Georgia Blade.
Yeah,
because I sent her a text earlier today.
Yeah,
and I said we're actually going to go see them tonight.
Oh, good.
And I said, I'm going to talk to Jimbo today. We're going to do a podcast, and she told me to tell you hello.
Oh, that's awesome.
So now that I've done that for Pam, she'll listen to this. I kept my promise, and I told you hello.
Yeah.
So good people.
Very good people. Pam and Mike are super people. I mean, I'm so excited to be working with them and representing Georgia Blade. And like I say, just going by Pam's house. She's already decorated for Christmas. It's
I know.
November. I'm
it's
so
all over
I'm so
Facebook.
proud of her. I'm so proud of her. I love it. So it was awesome. I'd not been to the shop before, so I got to go see the shop and see what they're doing. And they were cooking down there. Justin Butler was down there with them, and man, they are cooking. They've got some great products, and they are continuing to expand, continuing to grow. But at the root of it, Mike and Pam are just super people. They're community people. They're hometown people. They're people that you can believe in, trust in, have faith in, and know that they're going to do the right thing. And those are people that I like to be associated with.
I don't blame you one bit.
Yeah.
So we're going to go see the studio tonight too. So
awesome.
I'm looking forward to that trip. So.
It's neat. It's a neat place.
Let me dig back through your bio.
Yeah, sure.
And we're going to pull out the bio that's on your website. You want to plug your website?
Oh, yes. www. Not that anybody ever needs that anymore. My wife harasses me about saying that.
Right.
JimboOnLanier.com. JimboOnLanier.com.
I thought you would do it so much better than I would. So
that
was beautiful.
Yeah, I don't know that was all that great. It could have probably done better. But anyway, go ahead, please.
Okay, so going back to your bio page.
Yes.
You talked about Lake Geist.
Yeah.
With your dad.
Yeah.
And so you just told us a little bit about that. Is it safe to say that your dad was your hero growing up as far as what influenced you fishing wise?
Sure. Yeah. He was the guy. He was the go-to. I mean, absolutely. Whether it be for fishing or anything, it's like Dad knew. And my brother as well. My brother Bob was a big influence on me. Older brothers. I was an unplanned child. My dad was 50 when I was born. So
okay.
My dad fought in World War II. That's I posted about that on Veterans Day yesterday, talking about some aspects of Veterans Day. But my father fought in World War II. So I had older brothers that acted like fathers as well, and technically still do. I mean, my brother's in their late 60s. I'm 52. They're in their late 60s. So, or one of them is. One of them's passed, unfortunately. But that brother still acts like a father to me in a lot of ways. And he was my rock, man. He was the one that you just fully trusted. Always had your best interest in mind, and knew that you could come to him with anything, and he was gonna take care of it, or at least be on my side.
That's awesome. I've also noticed you mentioned it a couple of times, and this is not a planned question, but you mentioned you had to rent motors or whatever for the boats.
Yeah. what we owned was Dad had a 5.5 horsepower Johnson, 5.5 Johnson that was a 1963 model, I believe. So we would rent the John boat. We would
John boat,
yeah.
okay.
Now when I was fishing the Aquan Reservoir, we would rent the John boat, the trolling motors, everything, the batteries. We'd rent it all when we first started bass fishing in the 90s, early 90s. This was like 91, 92 when I was doing this. So, but when I was fishing with Dad on Geist Reservoir, that was back in the 70s, and we had the Johnson motor, but we didn't use trolling motors. We'd go anchor up and crappie fish, right? So we would rent the John boats from Tomy's Bait Shack. Tomy's Bait Shack. I will never forget that place. It was just like your hometown fishing store.
Right.
And it had every, accoutrement that you could ever think of about a fishing store back in the 70s. It was awesome. It was a great place. I remember it well.
That's awesome. I can remember growing up in Forsyth County.
Yeah.
There used to be a place on every corner you could buy minnows and stuff like
Yeah.
that back in the day. Those days, they're non-existent anymore. Not the
No.
smaller ones. Now, you can go to Hammond's.
Sure.
You can get that. But you used to pull up to a concrete building somewhere. It might not even have a sign, and the guy would sell Cokes, tobacco, and minnows or
Yeah.
worms or something like that. They
Yeah,
ran
yeah.
for it. So I assume basically the same kind of
Yes,
stuff there.
exactly the same. And there'd be the old guy out on the porch in a rocking chair telling fishing stories, and or at the bait, at the counter telling fishing stories. There was always something, man, and it was just that feel. It just kind of attaches to you, and it never goes away. That feeling you get when you walk in the bait store. I still get it when I walk in Hammond's. It's
Right.
like I'm in the bait store, and memories of that come back to me. In fact, I worked in a bait store. There was a local bait store in our neighborhood where I grew up in Pendleton, Indiana, that served Fall Creek Reservoir. Fall Creek, we had Fall Creek River, and we had a Fall Creek Park there in Pendleton, and I would literally. I would go and open and watch this bait shop when the family was on vacation or whatever. So I ran a bait shop when I was 16 for several weeks at a time, and then I would help out here and there. So I worked in a bait store. I can't believe I forgot to share that in my bio, but so many fun things to talk about. But yeah, so I worked in a bait store, and that feeling walking in, hearing the minnow tank, hearing the crickets chirping, seeing the stuff hanging on the pegboards, and seeing the refrigerator with the night crawlers in them,
Right.
and the frozen crawdads and all that stuff, man. Yeah, it just never goes away. That's part of who you are, I think, as an angler. I think we all have memories similar to that, and man, that's a special feeling,
Every time I walk into Hammond's or Bass Pro Shop, anything like that, it's like a kid at Christmas.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And I just wish I had the money for everything.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, all right, I'll take 2 of those, 3 of those, 5 of those, and you know what? Just one of everything. Just put it away. right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And put it on his tab.
Ben put it on his tab. Yeah, the Underhills bill. Put it on the Underhills bill.
That's right.
Yeah.
So, corporate America,
Yes.
white collar man,
Yeah.
how did that prepare you for the world of fishing, for guiding in general, the lessons that you kind of learned that
Sure.
you've brought over?
The thing that I think that I took away from corporate America that really helped me most in my business is at the time that I started my business in 2010, it was, the internet was obviously around, it was strong, but social media was a little bit newer to the masses, if you will. And, website development, while it's still growing, it was still, I'm not saying it was new, but it was, how to really make the most out of like search engine optimization, things like that. Those were terms that weren't household terms at the time. They were starting to become that, but they weren't there yet. I had a really good understanding because I worked with a lot of different marketing agencies as I did these renovations and brand changes for these hotels. So I'd have a lot of interactions and meetings with, big marketing firms, and we'll sit down and, create a plan, a marketing strategy, a marketing plan for a particular asset that, I was working, whatever company I was working for at the time. But I would work with these people, and I really grew an appreciation for how important it is to have a good website, one that's interactive, one that tells a story, one that is not text overloaded, but more video and picture loaded, because people really respond to those video images and photo images, and they emotionally connect with those before they would just text. So I geared my presentation of who I was and what I was about in that way. And I also understood the power of leveraging social media and where that could go. Now I've missed a couple buses along the way, and I'm starting, get on the Instagram thing and do that more because I was just solely Facebook for a while, and I realized that that's not where the young market is. The young market, the younger kids are on Instagram. That's where it is.
Absolutely.
Right? But I at least had a good base knowledge of how powerful that social media was and could become. And I just took the importance of a good online presence. And I think the existence of the internet and communication as we see it and know it today, which is so different than when I grew up and even what it was 20 years ago or 15 years ago, it's so much different. It continues to evolve. Understanding that and being able to leverage those forms of communication and to utilize the internet to position myself in the market really helped me grow my business much more quickly than if I was just, like it was in the old days. You had to grow a name that people would talk about, and that somebody would recommend to somebody, because that's how you got information.
Word of mouth,
and that's all. That's really the only option you had. You could put up a billboard, I guess. But
right,
how many fishing guys are putting up billboards? That doesn't happen, right? So, being able to utilize the internet and understand how it worked, at least to a degree, helped me position myself and get myself into the market quickly. And that was the biggest key, I think, to my success. And it's the biggest thing that I took from that corporate world. As you ask, what did I use to leverage into this business that I have now? That was it, that understanding. And the other thing I would share, too, before getting off this too far, networking and building relationships with people. That's something that I grew in that sales arena by just working with people, leading sales teams. Understood the importance of a face-to-face relationship, a handshake with the guy that you're getting ready to talk to, and that's really made a big impact on my business. Dale Carnegie said, and I'll never forget this, a long time ago, the most important sound to anyone's ear is the sound of their own name. And using people's names as you address them, it's a simple thing, but it's one of those things that, man, that's gold. Those basic principles, things like that, are things that I employed and used in growing and developing relationships with people. And I think that is really also at the baseline of why I've continued to be successful and continued to, grow and have other opportunities within this industry. So
that's good stuff. Now, in your bio, you mentioned taking the guided fishing trip.
Yep.
And apparently things did not go either as well as you thought they should have, or there were things that you thought you could improve on.
At the time that I came here, I did hire a guide, and I went out with him. I'm not saying names.
Yes, right.
No. But and I would never do that. I would never speak ill of anyone. But I just didn't feel catered to. I didn't feel like this individual cared whether I learned anything that day. He took me fishing,
right,
and he was fine to be around. It was all good in that respect. But I didn't feel I walked away with an education or any further steps that I could take to continue to grow as an angler on this lake. And I just didn't feel like I was appreciated overall, and I didn't feel poured into. And when I pay for an experience, I want that. I want to be catered to. I mean, I want to feel special. It's like the old, using your own name thing with Dale Carnegie. You want to feel special, and that's one thing that I took into my boat. When people come in my boat, I make sure they feel special. I make sure that they walk away with knowledge and information, that all their questions have been answered, and anything that I think along the way, based on what I see, I share with them. And, I want people to learn. And I feel really that's the thing that sets me apart from everybody that, guides right now, is that I feel I'm the best teacher. I feel that I teach and pour into people better than others, because a lot of that's that 20-year background in sales where I'm teaching, learning, teaching and guiding sales teams. We had I was responsible for $200 million sales budget over all the properties I oversaw. I had to be a good teacher. I had to be able to share this information and guide people. So I feel that I really teach well, and that came from that. That came from that experience. And I make people feel special too. That's the other thing. I want them to feel special. We make memories at Jimbo's. I understand how, because I think back, we talked about the piece earlier about how I felt when I got off the boat with Dad, or when we getting ready to go fishing,
yes,
or walking. That's special, man. That stuff stays with you, and I appreciate that. I know that part of what I'm doing, especially on these father-son trips, is that I'm making memories for these people. That this is an experience, and I owe them my best. I owe them my best to do the right thing and to give them everything they're looking for. And we start every trip like that. I mean, I start every trip, what are you looking for out of today? What do you want to get? And I was never asked that question, going back to that guide trip. I was never asked that question. I was like, we're going fishing. We're going to do what I want to do. And again, it was good fishing. We caught some fish and it was fine, but it was very blasé, I guess. It was just, it didn't leave an impression on me. And I just didn't think that was right. I didn't like that. It kind of stuck in my craw, It's like, and I made a note to myself when I stepped off the boat. I said, if I ever did decide, not that I was ever really physically thinking about it then, but I said, if I ever do become a guide, I'm going to make sure that the people that come on my boat feel special, that they're catered to, and that I give them something, that they get something, that they're walking away with more than just a caught fish, that it's something that they can look back on the rest of their lives and think about that trip. And we don't catch great fish every time. We generally catch fish. We don't always catch the biggest fish. But I promise you, when you come out on the boat, you're going to have fun. You're going to have a good time. You're going to feel comfortable. People that fish with me say all the time that, even though I just met Jimbo today, it felt like I've known him for years. I try to put people at ease with the way I have conversation, the way we talk through things. And I just want it to be an open format for them. And, I know I've kind of taken a tangent off here, but that's really what all that led me to. That's feeling like that was a motivator. It was a motivator to get me to be who I am, or part of a motivator to get me to who I am today in terms of a guide and what I do with my customers.
All right, so full-time guide, do you do any tournaments at all?
No, I used to fish tournaments, and I think, because that was the venue that I came from, or the opportunity that I came from, to be anybody when I was, growing in the sport, from the 90s and on until I moved down here, and even after I moved here, you really, all I knew at that time was to be a tournament angler, and that's how you got your victories and your wins, not just on stage, but just in general. That's how you identified yourself. That was an identifying mark.
Right.
So I carried that into fishing this lake, and then tournament fishing. When I became a guide, I felt like I've got to do well in some of these things to prove myself, if you will. But I have gotten away from tournament angling. I don't do it as much anymore, and I think that. In fact, I haven't fished tournaments in quite a while. And I think it's just, for me, as I look at it and what I do, it's a conflict of interest to fish tournaments regularly and to guide. I think when you're guiding, you have got to be in a very specific mindset of helping someone, doing for them, serving them, and making sure that they learn and create an environment that they feel comfortable in which to learn. And in tournament fishing, it's game planning. It is, all about me catching a fish, not somebody else catching a fish. And the strategy of approach is so much different than in guiding. I mean, in tournament fishing, obviously you're looking for 5 bites and you can be satisfied with 5 bites. Sometimes in guiding, that's what it is, if somebody's prepping for a tournament, but other times it's just about catching fish and getting a bite and learning a technique and those kind of things. So I think the more I got away from tournament fishing, I think the better guide I became. For me personally, it was the right thing to do, to get out of that tournament scene, get out of that mindset, get out of the competitiveness nature, and it allowed me to release some of those things that always drove me, as a competitive angler. And it also allowed me to fully be authentic with the information that I shared with my customers. Like there was, whether it happened or not, people, if you tournament fish a lot and you go hire a guide that tournament fishes a lot, and as a tournament angler, you're going to probably question, because it is that mantra around, guys that fish tournaments don't tell you everything. They don't give you all the information.
Just enough
to get you through, right? So I just felt like that image was out there, or that possibility of someone thinking that was out there. And I didn't want that. I don't want that associated with me, because my POD, if you will, my point of difference is that I do share the information. I share what I know. I provide information. I help guide people to the right solutions. I give people, information on where I'm fishing, what I'm fishing, how I'm doing it, not just on trips, but even if somebody, I do these weekly video reports, and I know that we'll probably get into that at some point, but even if someone comes up to me in the parking lot, and I don't know them from Adam, right? And they ask me a question, I'll help them. I'll tell them what I've done. Hey, this is how we caught him today. And, I may not pull out a map and go right through it there in the parking lot, but I'll tell them points, humps, whatever, this depth, this kind of, thing. I share the information. And as a tournament angler, part of you is just geared not to share everything, right? Because you're competing, and I get it. I mean, it's a tournament. That's what it's about. You're supposed to do better than the other guy. But I felt that those two objects or those two things, tournament fishing and guiding, I just don't think go together. I don't think, at least for me, they do not go together because one really directly conflicts with the other one in terms of how I want to be a fishing guide. Now, again, everybody's got a different viewpoint, and power be to everybody that wants to go do what they want to do, and that's awesome. It's perfect. But for me, being a fishing guide conflicts directly with tournament fishing is the way I see it. And so I just removed myself from fishing tournaments, and I think I'm a much better guide as a result. Not that I was ever truly that tempted to not share something with somebody, but that was just always hanging over me. It's like I would think about it. It would come in my mind, as I was taking some, we got this tournament Saturday, and I really want to go show that. That's not right. I mean, when somebody pays me for an experience, they deserve my best, and everybody deserves my best that day. And if I can't give it to them, then I'm not giving them the service that they deserve. I'm not providing what I'm being paid to provide. And I wasn't comfortable with that. So that's how and why I really got away from tournament fishing. Now, I'm not saying I won't jump in a friendly pot tournament with somebody if the conditions and situation is right with some of my buddies or something. But to go fish, any trail or name tournaments or anything other than a few guys getting together in the parking lot and talking smack. Talking some smack. I'm just not going to do that. So,
I got you.
Yep.
Okay, so let's talk about Lake Lanier.
Yeah.
Because that is where you specialize. That's the only lake you fish.
It is, yes.
So tell everybody who may not know Lake Lanier, who's going to listen to this, who has no idea about Lake Lanier. Let's just give them a little overview of the lake itself.
Absolutely. Lake Lanier is considered a deep clear water impoundment. It was flooded in 1957. It's dammed up. They dammed up the Chattahoochee River. Also feeding into the lake is the Chestatee River. So it's mainly the Chattahoochee, but the Chestatee is a contributor. It's 38,000 square acres. It's got approximately, you see different numbers online, but we'll call it 600 miles of shoreline. So it's a big place, 44 miles from top to bottom, where you can navigate up in the Chattahoochee River all the way down to the dam is 44 miles. By most estimates, there's, again, there's a lot of information out there, but those are the general specifics. It's generally a clear lake. The bigger spots tend to be down on the south end of the lake, the lower lake. A lot of people do elect to fish the rivers, which I think fish much differently than the lower lake does.
And that's where I was going. Wouldn't you consider that more a largemouth? Are there any largemouths still left in Lanier?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sure. There are largemouth, and quite frankly, there are some big largemouths still down south. I mean, a lot of people, I think, believe that they've got to go up in the rivers to catch largemouth. And while the concentration of largemouth might be better up in the rivers, there's certainly some big girls down south. I mean, we've even just this year over structure, we've caught two largemouth over 6 pounds on structure, meaning on a point or a hump, something offshore. And that was, well into the lower lake. So there are some good fish down in the lower end of that lake. I don't think, the persona of it and the way the lower lake fishes in the clear water, people think that, because you get tuned into fishing a specific way, and you think largemouth fishing, you think back in a creek and shallow next to a blowdown and all that kind of stuff, and that is true to some degree, but it's not always the case. It's not always the case.
I think that's correct too, because that was the persona that I was always told.
Yeah, right.
If you want to catch largemouth, you go up the Chattahoochee.
That's right, and that's not wrong. I mean, you can go up the Chattahoochee and catch largemouth, no question, and there's good largemouth up there. But I just don't want everybody to know, I don't want everybody to think that that's the only place you can go to catch largemouth. Now, if you're going to target them and that's really what you want to catch, going in Wahoo and Little River and up the Chattahoochee and other places, way up the Hooch, I know a lot of guys go up there. That's probably your better option if you want to target largemouth, because there's more, variety up there of things that largemouth more relate to, But the south end has largemouth, and you can catch them in some of the creeks down there, and some of the places that you wouldn't necessarily even think about. Like, every fall, it seems like, or late summer, early fall, we catch largemouth over structure, over humps, over points. They're out there schooling with the spotted bass, and just as aggressive. And they've got that same body shape, The spots have those big pot bellies on them, and that's what you see on these largemouth you catch. They're a different breed of largemouth. They have adapted. They have changed in the way that they go about their lives, if you will. And they became the better athletes that the spots are.
And you mostly target spotted bass, so that's your target species.
It is, and the reason being is that the spotted bass. I mean, Lanier is known as a spotted bass fishery. It's truly a world-class spotted bass fishery. The thing that made that possible is the blueback herring that were illegally introduced into the lake back in the 90s, and has since changed the way the lake fishes, but it's made for some really big spotted bass, right? So I know that people can go to other lakes and other bodies of water if they want a largemouth experience and find better fishing, for largemouth. So I try to focus on the spotted bass because that's something that they won't get somewhere else, and they won't find as easily someplace else. That's that's why I focus most of my time, not all, but most of my time, I focus on the lower lake, and I focus on chasing, spotted bass on structure. And when I say structure, I mean offshore structure like points and humps, because that's something else that most people are not going to find at other bodies of water. You're not going to see as much of that complete offshore experience, targeting fish, really just based on electronics, right? You using your electronics to read your map and your chart and understanding where you are in relation to the feature that you're fishing. That's something that you've got to get familiar with, and it's totally different than going, bank beating for largemouth, right? So.
Right.
That's why I provide the service that I do, and I focus on what I do, because you can go other places to go largemouth fishing. You can't go other places and do as well with this offshore spotted bass fishing like you can on Lanier, and that's what I specialize in.
Looking back on the history of Lanier, that the real heyday of the lake is, the last few years since the bluebacks have come into the lake, it's always been a good lake, or is it just exploded in popularity because of?
I think, talking to some of the folks that fished this lake years and years ago, I think a lot of them, are a little frustrated with it because it's so different than the way it used to fish. Mm-hmm. But from what I understand, it's always been a really good lake. But since the introduction of the bluebacks, that's when the spotted bass population really exploded, and we really started getting these big spotted bass that again could be caught offshore. And you look back, the lake largemouth record is almost 18 pounds. It's like 1793. Held by Emery Donahue Sr., and I actually know Emery Donahue Jr., if you will, and I've heard the story about that fish, but that was almost an 18-pound largemouth. There's nothing like that in Lanier now, that 18-pound class kind of largemouth. That's not there to be caught. It just doesn't happen, and I think that a lot is due to the transition of the lake. I mean, I think that fish was caught back in the late 60s. Mm-hmm.
It's an old record.
Yeah.
It's an old record.
So what used to be on the lake and what is now, I think is for what, based on the way I see it now, not everybody's going to agree with me. I think it's a lot better now because of the size of the fish that you can catch. But you have to fish completely differently. It requires a major paradigm shift to go from fishing a largemouth lake and bank fishing to fishing Lanier properly, to catch those fish. Anybody can stumble into one here or there on the bank, and sure, in springtime when the fish are shallow and coming up spawn, you can get by with fishing the bank. That's not a problem. You can go bank fishing and do quite well, and even be competitive, in events at times. But consistently, year round, day in, day out, offshore is where you're going to catch your bigger fish on Lake Lanier.
Okay. So let's talk techniques
of
offshore fishing.
Yeah, sure.
Give me your favorite one.
My very favorite's topwater, without a question. We get a phenomenon that occurs here, starting in probably late April through June, and then again late September through October into early November, where you can go to offshore type structure. And again, I'll define that as an underwater hump or point. Sometimes these points are long-running points. And as a part of that, people, there's a lot of brush that's been sunk in Lanier. And there are brush piles that people have put in almost everywhere. And with today's electronics, everybody kind of put those things into, and I've dumped brush in the lake too, but they put them in so you'd have their own fishing spot, right?
Right, yep.
So, and nobody really tells you where they put them. But with today's electronics, you're going to find these places, right? They're on, these humps and points in key areas, maybe where there's a shift in, structure or a drop, maybe a drop off on the side of a point or side of a hump or just up on a flat, just, near that drop, wherever. If you can, read navionics or read Lake Master chips, you can figure out where these things are. And with the abilities of today's sonar and structure scan capabilities that like Lowrance has, you can go find these things. You can find these brush piles. And what Lanier offers is you can, these fish and the bait fish will relate to these offshore brush piles. And if you know where they are, you can pull up onto that structure and keep yourself about a cast away and make a cast over that brush pile and bring wolf packs of spotted bass up that will literally fight over your topwater bait. And it's the most incredible, to me, it's the most incredible, energizing, just awesome experience, to see that. And what I really became to appreciate now is watching the look on other people's faces that have no idea, why are we fishing in the middle of the lake? What's going to happen? You're out of your mind.
And when the water blows up.
Yeah. And there's a wolf pack of them, and they're fighting over it, and they're knocking it out of the water and chasing it going on. It's so exciting. And like I say, the look on people's faces is just amazing. I had, if I can divert really quick, I had 2 people out from Japan with me earlier this year. Tremendous people. We had, language barriers, so we couldn't talk. But I figured out to pull up an app on Google that will allow me to, we communicated. I could speak into the app and, spit Japanese back out to them and back and forth. And we did this. So we communicated. The look on their faces when that first wolf pack came up and the veracity with which those bass attacked that lure was absolutely priceless. I mean, it was just something that, man, that just made it all worth it. That's why I do what I do. That look on the face, right? That like, oh my gosh, I cannot believe that just happened.
Just shell shocked.
That just happened. Yeah, it was crazy. And it's just fun, man. That's, I get energized talking about it. I love that experience. So yes, when I can get a topwater bite, and there's other situations to get topwater there too. That's just the one that Lanier's probably most famous for and is probably most different from other fisheries. Is that being able to, throw over a brush pile that has been planted or dropped in a certain area and, work your topwater baits over the top of them and get them to come up.
How about a couple examples of the topwater baits you like to use?
My probably all-time favorites are a chug bug. I have done some work with a chug bug over the years, and I work it very aggressively. I like to have that bait spraying. It's not just a simple pop. It's truly, I use it as a chugger, and I want it spraying water because that spray really mimics the look of when the natural, when the natural chasing process is occurring, when the fish are actually up chasing those bluebacks. That helps emulate that look and that feel and that noise, right? So a chug bug's probably number one. And then a gunfish, the Lucky Craft gunfish, also sort of does the same thing. It really contributes to that look that you often see and what, when the fish are actually chasing bait. And I think what, it really mimics what the fish see. And that's really, any day that you approach with a topwater day, you really need to figure out, okay, what are the fish looking for today? Because it'll vary day to day to day. It's not going to be the same today as it was yesterday as it will be tomorrow. It's just not going to be that way. You've got to figure out what sort of presentation that they're looking for that day. And so it's just like with any technique or any approach that you're going to take. I've got a box full of topwater lures, man, and I've got so many options, in color and in size and all that kind of stuff, and in type of lure and action of lure. So I've got the ability to kind of dial it in to a degree of what do they want this day? Do they, is it windy today? Is it not windy? Is it, sunny? Is it not sunny? And generally, because of the behavior of the bluebacks actually are attracted to the sun. They like the sun. It makes the zooplankton that they feed upon bloom in the water column. So they'll come up in the water column. They'll rise on sunny days. So believe it or not, this is the other thing that really blows people away. Your best topwater day on Lanier, particularly like in a post-spawn environment or here in October, is a sunny, light breeze day. It doesn't have to be, it can be windy too. You just don't want it flat. You want to have some chop on the water. But a sunny day, those are the days that you can really draw those wolf packs up on topwater on Lanier. And that's the other thing, like I say, that really flips people out. I was like, why are we throwing topwater? It's 1 o'clock in the afternoon and the sun's up, and this is not. Yeah, it is. Watch this.
Well, for someone who's listening and they just noticed you said you'd like a little chop but not flat, tell them why you don't want that flat.
Yeah, flat. Flat allows the fish to more easily discern, I believe, that the baits that you're using and presenting are not real. That wind provides or produces current, and current is always a plus. Current positions fish, as I've always said. But the other thing that it does is it really helps disguise that topwater lure, right? It really helps keep the fish from being able to discern that, hey, this is not the real thing.
So it's more for a sight thing.
It's light refraction and all the things that allow, because a clear top, the fish can get a really good look at that bait. Even if you're moving it fast, they can get a really good look at that bait. And you'll see if you try to work some topwater baits on Lanier on flatter, less wind days, you'll see them come up and kind of roll beneath it. It's like they've started at their approach, like, yeah, I want it. No, I don't.
Yeah, right.
Gone. Or they'll miss it. They'll jump over it and miss it. Or, something goofy will happen through that process that just is a trigger, like, okay, this is not the right bait. It's too shiny. It's too big. They're getting too good of a look at it. A lot of times in those situations, just as a note for the listeners, I'll switch to a clear bait, a clear anything. Like I keep clear chug bugs, clear gunfish, clear vixens, clear walking and chugging baits. That sometimes will get you through that on the really light to no wind scenarios, and they're still willing to come to the surface and eat topwater. You can use that clear, and they can't as easily discern that to not be real, and you'll get hookups where you'll get misses on either colored or chrome kind of baits.
Do you throw your topwater on monofilament?
Generally speaking, yes. I'll do braid to mono leaders on my spinning reels. Because a lot of times I'll have customers come out, particularly in the summertime, that are not as hardcore as some of the anglers I take out, so they're not really bait caster people. So I always keep several spinning rods set up. All my Shimano rods and reels are set up with. I use Seagar. Typically, Smackdown is what I use. 30-pound Smackdown with a 15-pound Seagar monofilament leader. So that's the combo, or that's a setup that I use fishing topwater on spinning gear. And on bait casting, I know a lot of guys like using the braid for the distance and all that kind of stuff. I've never been that guy, and I've tried it. I think the disadvantages of braid in terms of the backlashes and things you can get with somebody that maybe is not perfect at throwing a bait caster is really, because that can create an event where, like, well, that spool's done, chuck that out, and we got to start over. Monofilament, you can always get out,
Right.
And it's just easier to work with, I think, overall. And personally, I like the stretch too, because a lot of people, even guys that know how to throw bait casters and are really in tune with it, they'll set the hook on the first splash with these topwaters. And that's one thing I really coach out of people is like, look, these fish might hit that bait, 3 or 4 times before they get it. So you've got to stay very focused and very alert not to jerk that bait away until they actually get it, because
that's got to be hard.
It is. Oh, it's incredibly hard, and it's still hard for me, but I've done it so much that I just have trained that out of myself. But even if I'm not focused, that's the issue, is the focus part of it. If you're not focused, if you've kind of fallen asleep and you're just walking that bait back and forth or chugging that bait and you're not really tuned into exactly what you're doing, and a fish strikes that bait and you're not expecting it, you're going to jerk. Absolutely. That's just that's how you're programmed, right? That's how you're trained as an angler. That's your first instinct.
He doesn't have it in his pocket.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. He doesn't have it in his pocket. Set the hook, man. He's got it. But in reality, what these fish do is they'll come up and bust on these bluebacks and literally try to knock them senseless, because the bluebacks are so fast. I did this on one of my video reports. I actually filmed it at Hammond's in the bank tank, or in the bait tanks, or near them, and I showed the movement of the bluebacks. The bluebacks are so incredibly agile, so fast. It's amazing how fast they work. So the fish, when they're focused on trying to get one, blueback, they will hit it repeatedly, sometimes to knock it senseless, and then it makes it easier to get. So they'll come up and pop it. But people aren't, you're not always tuned into that. And like I say, you can't set the hook right when you first get it.
How far up from these humps will a spot come for topwater?
It depends on the day and depends on the circumstances. I'd say 20 feet plus, because a lot of the brush piles, people say, well, that fish came out of 25 foot of water, but the brush pile was probably in 25 foot of water, maybe 30, lakes down a little bit now, might be less. And they'll come up from those depths. But you got to understand, most of the fish that are active and aggressive are sitting on the top of that brush pile. And, a lot of people, guys are very ingenious in the way that they set these things up. They'll weight down the bottoms and they'll float up the tops. And so the brush pile may be 12 or 15 foot off of the bottom. I mean, you may be in a 25-foot, water depth in terms of where the brush pile sits, but the top of it may be 10 or 15 feet from the surface. And those fish, the ones that you're catching on topwater, are often more relating to that upper level of the brush pile. They're not down, they aren't all the way down at the bottom of the brush pile and coming up exactly from 25 feet. But, I think in different scenarios, different schooling scenarios, and when fish are more active, they're likely to come from a greater distance. Their strike zone, I think, gets much larger the more active and the more aggressive they get, right? So, and that's going to vary day to day, just like everything else. So, but I'd say as a good average, and answer to your question, 12 to 15 feet, I think, is a distance that they would come readily, and I'm sure in many situations further, and a lot of times it needs to be a lot closer. I mean, again, that all goes back to their mood of the day and
mood of the day.
What we're doing. Yep.
Okay, so you've got a customer out, and the topwater bite is not on. What's
Yes.
your number two?
The first thing I'll do in that situation when the topwater bite's not working is I'll switch to a much more subtle presentation. And a lot of times the things that we've been able to do this year are go from a topwater bait to a fluke. And a fluke is, it's kind of considered a soft jerk bait, right? But you can utilize it in a way that kind of mimics a topwater bait. So we'll throw the fluke out on a weightless rig. I'll nose hook my, the fluke, throw it on a weightless rig, reel it back as fast as I possibly can.
Now, when you say nose hook,
yes.
so you're not running it through Texas style?
No.
Come back. You just hook it through the nose.
I am using a 1/0 Gamakatsu drop shot hook, and I'm literally just putting it. It's like a circle hook, and I put that hook through the very nose of the bait. I start from the underside, the what I call the flap side of the super fluke, and start on the at the nose on the underside and pull it up through the top. And literally, that's all I do. I don't have any other hooks. And I've fished it so many different ways over the years, but I'm telling you, the action that you get when you nose hook a fluke is so much better than any other rig I've seen. When you nose hook with that Gamakatsu hook, it is so much better. And at least for me, if you have patience, the hookup ratio does not suffer. In fact, it's better, I believe.
See, now I appreciate you saying that because I've thrown many flukes.
Yep.
I've always been taught to rig it up Texas style,
Yep.
pretty much, and bring it. And I can never get the same action, it seems, with each individual fluke. It's always something different, and I'm not consistent with it. So you're saying this way is much more
You will
consistent.
get much more consistent. I think, my personal belief is that a fluke, when you twitch it, it's got to dart to be effective. It has got to dart left to right, just like you'd be walking a super spook or whatever. It has got to dart left or right when you twitch it. And if it just rolls or if it, just kind of halfway works, that's not going to do it. I don't think that's nearly the fish attractor is that, that throws of a dying bait fish, that twitch that gets you that side to side motion that is so indicative, and the fish trigger into that's dying. That's easy prey, right? That's a bait fish that's struggling, and it's easy prey. So I think you get that side to side motion so much easier when you nose hook versus any other hook style.
I have learned something today right there.
There you go, Danny.
Because I'm terrible with
Free
the fluke.
charge today. Free charge.
All right,
today.
that's
Yeah,
awesome.
man.
Okay, so the fluke bite. So
Yes.
you've got a customer with a fluke bite. Basically, you're trying top water, but
Yeah,
just
doesn't
maybe
work.
just a little bit. So now that's not working.
Yeah, so you go to the fluke, right, and you work the fluke fast on the surface a lot of times and then let it settle. So it gives them something just below the surface that they can respond to potentially. And sometimes that makes a big difference. I mean, that really does. They don't want the loud thrashing of some kind of like a Lucky Craft gunfish or the chug bug or whatever. They don't want that. They want something very subtle, and that fluke provides that. If they're just completely not in the mood to come up, then it's like, okay, what level of the water column are they willing to commit to? What level of the water column are they willing to eat in? So then you can start going down the water column. Spy bait is a good option. It's definitely a more finesse technique. It's a very small propped bait, front and back. You throw out, let it sink down, 8, 10, 12 seconds, depending on what you're fishing and how deep the cover you're fishing may be. And then it's just a very slow wind back. that's sort of a last resort for me. I don't, I've got some customers. If the customer's tuned into that kind of presentation, is okay with that, great, I'm going to put them on it. But I have a hard time just staying at that pace for too long. Because I feel like if I rotate through the options enough and I stay on the move enough, I'll find the fish that's doing what I want it to do at that time during certain seasons. Now, there's times a year that's just off the table, but there's times that, I feel I can get topwater bites and topwater action when others don't, perhaps, because I'm really like dialed into the process.
And back to the patient.
And back to the patience thing. Yeah. And it's that, going back to starting this business is like just never giving up, Now, I will make the point, you cannot force feed fish, and you cannot go in a tournament environment and try to catch fish the way you want to catch them as a tournament angler. You've got to be much more versatile, and you've got to really be willing to make changes quickly, or you're going to lose. So, but in a guide trip environment, man, if I can get a few topwater strikes in a day for somebody that has not seen that, holy moly, that's a game changer, man. That's a big deal, right? And that's something that, like I said, they're not getting anywhere else. They've not seen that before. It's new. It's different. It's an experience. It's something that's, it's a memory. It's unforgettable to see that for the first time, especially.
Oh, it's awesome. It's absolutely awesome.
I have these Japanese folks that were out with me that I referenced earlier. I have heard from them so many times since then. They've contacted me on Instagram, on Facebook. They said that of their whole trip to the United States, that experience, the 8 hours they spent with me on that trip, was absolutely incomparable to anything else. They just said that made their experience, and they want to come back and fish Lake Lanier again. They don't want to come back and visit and do all the other stuff. They want to come fish Lake Lanier again.
Seriously,
it's awesome,
and that's got to make it worth it for you.
Oh, it's awesome. I love to see that. I love to see the growth in people. I love to see the excitement in people. Like I mentioned before, I love working with the high school kids because they're sponges. They want to learn. When they come in the boat, they are eyes wide open, and they are absolutely, hey, fill me up, pour into me, show me what this is about. What can, what different way can I catch a fish that I'm not doing now? Teach me something. And man, they just they see it, and you can see it when the light bulb goes off, right? When it clicks, you're like, man, I did something. I made a difference in this kid's life today, in something that, he may end up doing the rest of his life, just like I have.
That's awesome.
So that's a cool experience, man. That
definitely
lights me up.
How about something that Josh and I witnessed this weekend on a tournament we were fishing, because neither one of us are really good at it, and that is the drop shot.
Sure.
Now, do you incorporate that?
I do. Absolutely. And I use Lanier baits, fruity worms. I know Shane talked about him on
Fruity Worms Rule.
Fruity Worms Rule. Jimmy Harmon, he's one of my cohorts, if you will, and we do the Geminar event together,
right.
and we try to support each other. Myself, Jim Farmer, and Lanier Jim Harmon. So yes, I do the drop shot. Jimmy's really, he is an expert at that. That is his thing. He is absolutely dialed into drop shotting, and that's what he does, and that's his go-to. And I respect that, because he does learn some nuances of the approach and the technique more than somebody that does it on demand or on, situationally.
Right.
And I use it more situationally.
And what would be the situation that would cause you?
Where I can't get him to bite anything else.
That's your last resort.
That's it's spy bait and drop shot. And again, nothing against the approach. It is a numbers catcher, and you can catch some good fish on it, but it's just not my go-to. If I can get them biting something more aggressively, that's easier, and again, that experience. But again, I'm happy to teach it, and I do teach it to people. People say, hey, teach me how to use drop shot. What's it about? And then it's, okay, let's talk about the electronics and how to line up on the place, and all the different things, and then the rigging of the bait, and the presentation of the bait to get it to work, and the do's and don'ts, all those kind of things. I'm happy to walk people through that. But if we're just going out fishing and we're trying to catch fish for fun, that's not always the thing that I'm going to go to. I feel I can catch them other ways sometimes. But again, I don't want to take anything away from it. It's an excellent tool. It will catch fish. And a lot of times it is the right thing to be doing. But it's not always the thing that I lean on first. It's not my first go-to, which is fine, because I like having Jimmy there, because I know, hey, if I've got something I can't figure out on drop shot, I know he will know it. And same with me. He'll talk to me about topwater and swim baits and all that stuff that I really specialize in.
So you want to say you're looking for the aggressive strike. You're looking for the fish that's really ready to pop.
Oh yeah,
quick.
I want the one that is ready to eat. I look for the fish consistently, and when I fish Lanier, and this is the advice I give to people all the time, I look for the fish that wants to bite. I don't care about catching the fish that I need to talk into biting. I'm looking for the fish that's ready to bite right now, and that's why I commit to staying on the move. Now there are, again, times of the year that staying on the move and just looking for something that's not ever going to be there is not the right thing. There's times you got to slow down and really penetrate the area more. But I feel that in most situations, 95% of the time, the fish that you're going to catch when you first show up to the location or within a very narrow window of it, or you're not going to catch them. You may see them all over the graph, but your chances of catching them really go down. It's kind of like the law of diminishing return. The longer you stay in that environment, and the longer that the fish can get acquainted to the fact that you're there or that something is not right with their current environment, the less opportunity and less chances you've got to catching fish.
So you run and gun.
Run and gun, baby. Yep. Yeah, that's and again, that it's not always the way. And there's times of the year like you can't really run and gun because you've got to spend to fish an area properly, like with the jig, for instance. You're fishing, dragging a jig on the bottom. It's going to take you a while to make some presentations and present that jig properly. But I'm not going to stay there any longer than I have to feel like, okay, if there was a fish willing to bite here, I would have caught him by now.
Gotcha.
Right? Now it's time to move on and try something else. Okay. Right? So, yeah.
All right, so you have your guide service, and one of the things that you have incorporated into that is, of course, your video fishing reports.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that.
Yeah.
So let's tell the viewers what that is about. Maybe pick you up a couple of subscribers, do that.
Sure.
So
one of the things, I've always written a fishing report. I've always, through the years that I've been, guiding, it'll be 10 years in May that I've done this. So, I'd always had a written report, and I'd always been honest. That's one of my, the paramount things that I base my business on is integrity and being authentic and being transparent. And I try to be that way with everybody. And I just think that is a cornerstone of who and what Jimbo's is. So I felt comfortable that, I offer something that most people don't, and I offer information that you really can't get anyplace else, that nobody's going to be willing to share with you. So I created this online weekly video fishing report. And basically what I do is I get in front of my camera and I hook up a microphone and I record what I did that week. I record a video fishing report where I sit down and I talk to my own camera for 20 minutes about, hey, here are the baits that I've been using. Here's the types of areas that I've been fishing. Here are examples of those areas that I've been fishing. Here are places that I've actually caught fish, so you can understand exactly what I'm talking about. Again, baits, presentations, any mojo that I've developed through the week that I feel like, you really got to look for this, or you got to find that, or, don't hit points that drop off as sharp. Look for the long running ones, or, anything consistent that I have been able to provide through the week or be able to identify, I'll provide that in the report. So it's really designed for the weekend angler, the guy that is not out there all the time. And when he does get a chance to go fishing, it offers him a place to start. So he can go, okay, I know what's been going on this week, and I will spend some time at the end of the report kind of providing a look ahead, a prognostication of what's to come. I call it the Jimbo Future Cast. Based on the forecast and based on the lake conditions and what I've been seeing of the fish, I kind of project in the weekend. I film it every Wednesday or Thursday. It's always posted on my website by Thursday, and my subscribers can go on, log in, use their password, and view the report. So it's for the guy that just gets to go out every so often. He can get a look into, hey, this is honest information about what's going on, where it's been happening, and now I've at least got a starting place. I know that I can go to these kind of places, and they have been there in the last 2 or 3 days. So if they've moved or their mood has changed, it hasn't changed that much. So at least I've got a place, a reference point. And the gratifying thing with this is I get so many people that come up to me in the parking lot, at the ramp or whatever, or see on the lake, Jimbo, your videos helped me out so much. It has made such a difference in my fishing. I've gotten all sorts of notes from people, and obviously they don't want to be talked about specifically who they are, but they've won tournaments like their club tournament because they've tuned into this thing,
right? Absolutely.
And started watching it, and they've learned and grown. And again, it's just another avenue to get people on fish, to get people catching fish. And I think it's awesome. It's just fun.
It sounds awesome. Now let's kind of use this week.
Yeah.
You did fish yesterday.
Yes.
So what do you think, kind of tell how that was and how you think maybe with this front that's come through, it might change this week, or just kind of something similar to what you would put on your report, just a little taste of it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. When I go to film this report, like I say, I'm off the water today. We'll be off the water tomorrow, which is unusual. But the cold temperatures, my client today didn't necessarily want to fish in the rain, nor did I.
Right.
With the wind blowing and so cold and rainy and all that kind of stuff. Tomorrow, the low is 22 tonight. It's
going to be chilly.
Yeah, and, that's just not comfortable. That's not a comfortable environment. That's a good day for a grizzled Lanier veteran that really wants to go out and catch fish. And will they bite? They probably will, absolutely. But is it a comfortable day to fish? Not really. So it's not the best guide environment. So I won't have as much on the water time information as I normally do, because normally I'm on the water, 3 or 4 days by the time each week before I film the report. And I'm running generally through October, November. I've been 6 days a week, so I get plenty of on the water time that I can really understand trends and see what's happening. So I'll have a little less information to work with, but what I do in those situations is I look back to historical data, things that, what has happened like this in situations like this before when we've had a major cool down, major cold front. And, I even talked about it a little bit in last week's report, because obviously I knew this was coming. And the thing that I said was, and the thing that I shared is that, hey, this could really be a good thing, even though the period during the cold front may not be good, and we'll probably experience some tougher fishing as we traditionally do with any cold front. But this cold front, may help lock them in and get them on the next pattern. Like we're transitioning out of a topwater and a hard swim bait bite and, into the crankbait and the spinnerbait and the jerkbait sort of bite and the worm, shaky head, and the jig bite. All those things are coming, but November is typically a very transitional month, and fish are really spread out, and they're spread out right now. You can catch them from 2 to 52, right? And I've done that over the past week. There's all sorts of different approaches you can kind of junk fish this time of the year. So the point that I made, and I will make again this week, is that this is an opportunity potentially to get those fish shifted into their next pattern and committed to it, versus kind of, sort of, some of them getting there now, some will get there next week, and
kind of forcing the issue.
Yeah, kind of force them into, okay, what are you going to be doing next? And a lot of times that's ditch fishing. I talk about ditch fishing a lot, and that's something that I'll get into as well in those reports. Is what is a ditch? What are the ditches I'm fishing? What am I looking for specifically in those ditches? And then that what I call the rock bite. And you go throwing a crankbait on the rocks and catching them on the rocks. Where am I throwing the shaky head and the jig? So I'll talk about the advancement potentially to that pattern in the ditch fishing, expounding on some of the trends that I've seen in the times that I've been out. I was out, last week, and then again Monday, yesterday. So I'll talk about some of the trends that I've seen and really what I expect in terms of that next pattern solidification and how that's going to look and how people need to adjust to that, and how much further perhaps they can go back in the creeks and still see activity. There's some movements that are going to go on. There's some things that are going to change. What are they all? I don't know yet, but I can give some good indications of what I think it's going to be moving forward.
All right, Jimbo, let's get to your Geminar.
Yeah, man.
Okay, so please tell our viewers and listeners, I say viewers now, this is the first time we've filmed, so please tell everybody what the Geminar is.
Sure.
And how they can benefit from attending it.
Yeah, great. Thank you. This is an event. We have held seminars, or Jimbo's has held seminars now for 7 or 8 years. We've gathered people together in an environment where, they can sit and listen and learn. And, we've had varying degrees of interest and success with, what we've done and the agenda that we've provided. But over the last few years, I've kind of teamed up with a couple local guys that I think and I know Shane talked about him when he was here. Jim Farmer with Castaway Baits, and Jimmy Harmon, who's known as Lanier Jim Harmon of Lanier Baits. So those two people, in conjunction with myself, we started a few years ago. I say it's probably 3 now that we started doing events together and giving people, because we all three fish differently. So we approach Lanier differently Each of us has a different attack method, if you will, of how we're going to go about it. So it really provides our attendees a three-pronged approach, if you will, to how to handle any given situation. So we'll approach different seasons and talk about, hey, how would you do this, Jimbo, and how would you do this, Jimmy, and how would you do this, Jim Farmer? And everybody's got a different style. Everybody, like I say, relies on different techniques. Farmer's a cranker. He's really known for his crankbaits, and that's really what Castaway focuses on. Although he does other stuff too with, lure painting, and he's got his emerald popper, and so he dabbles in other areas. But crankbaits is, I think, really what kind of brought him to where he is, and he has been able to, expand from there. And Jimmy is all about the plastics and the drop shot worms, and he's a drop shot connoisseur, man. That guy knows the ins and outs of drop shotting. He's really good at the technique. So, he's got his own bait line, but again, a different approach, a different mentality. So these three people, I had done the seminars on my own for several years, and it had good success. The first seminar I ever did, where I got a room and really made it a formal sort of event. I think over 2 weeks we had around 100 people somewhere in that arena, about 100 people. So that was awesome. It was just me, and I was thinking, well, we can bring more to the event. We can bring more information if the three of us do this thing together. And we provide, like last year, the 2019 Geminar was all about a year on Lanier. That was our theme. So we talked about, hey, this is how you break down every month and every season, and here are our three different ways of approaching it, right? Mm-hmm. So we talk about spring season. This is how I'm going to do it. This is how Jim Farmer's going to do it. This is how Jimmy Harmon's going to do it. And then we go through the summer, and maybe those that were a little more focused, like Harmon, would talk more about the summertime and the drop shot, later in the summer. And then Farmer would talk more about the cranking aspects, like in the fall and then again in the spring. And he would talk about the crayfish molting and how that affects his crankbait choice and his approach and his presentation and all these different things. So it's a lot of in-depth information to really, you start learning more and more and more. So this year, what we're doing this year is the three gems. We're calling it the Geminar Respooled. The 2020 Geminar Respooled is the official name of the event. You can register on my website. Registration is now open, jimboandlanier.com/seminar. Just go to the seminar tab on my website, and you'll see the registration opportunities right there up front. So you can go. Registration is now open. But this year we're going to do the three gems. We're going to talk about spring fishing on Lanier. So we're going to take some of the information that we talked about last year and really dive into it now. We're really going to go down. We're going to drill down.
So specific on the spring.
Very specific on spring fishing. And this year, and we've really, we had 223 people come last year, plus we had 15 vendors. This year, we're going to have 400 people, and we're going to have 35 vendors, and we're in a much bigger space. We're down at the Forsyth County Conference Center. So this is the one that's attached to Lanier Tech. It's off of Exit 13, and we've got so much more space to work with, and knowing that we've got more opportunity to teach, more opportunity to share, we have really approached this year's event with a diversity mindset. How can we reach more people in different arenas besides just Lanier, and also, appeal to different audiences, not just here locally in the Lake Lanier community, but other audiences throughout the state and regionally as well. So what we did was this. I came up with the idea of let's diversify. Let's get something, a team from the kayak angling arena, because kayak angling right now is one of the fastest, if not the fastest growing facet of our sport.
It's blowing up. So
we secured Clint Henderson, who is a local Georgia angler and has won, a lot of kayak titles. I mean, he's awesome.
Yeah, he's big stuff.
He is big stuff. And we've also been able to secure Christine Fisher, she is the reigning national Hobie kayak champion. She won that championship at Kentucky Lake this year. She's phenomenal.
Now, is that a female only or female male? She's champion of all of it.
She's champion of all of it.
That's what I wanted to make sure you said.
No,
yeah.
This is not. No, she was competing against men. Absolutely. She is a go-getter. I have spoken with her. I've really not sit down and spent a lot of time with her yet, but I look forward to. She's special, man. She's got the stuff. She is so motivated, and I love her cause and why she's doing what she's doing. You can read about that on her Instagram post. I don't want to try to put words in her mouth or try to inadequately position what she's doing, but it's impressive. And why she does what she does is impressive. You should definitely read about her. Check her out, Christine Fisher, or at Christine Fisher on Instagram, and then you can go from there to her website. But she's just She calls herself Midwest Fisher Gal. She loves to fish, and that's what it's about.
That's impressive.
It is impressive. It's pretty cool. So that we did to really get, to attract the kayak anglers, because we know how big this is and what's going on. And we're going to have a guy, the dugout's going to be there. Jamie Koza is going to be one of our vendors, and he's going to have brand new line of Hobie kayaks there. So there's going to be a bunch of Hobie kayaks there to look at. We've got 2 outstanding kayak anglers. So that's got the kayak market covered. And then regionally, we've got people coming from, Kaz Anderson is coming from Lake Chatuque, which, Kaz is a very, actually a young man, only 17 years old. But I'm telling you, this kid is so mature for his age and is so well advanced in what he does. He's so far wise beyond his years, and he's a tremendous angler. He's a great speaker, and I know he's going to make a big impact. So he's going to be a part of Lake Chatuque and the high school program that we're going to do, which I'll get to in a little bit. Then we've got Clayton Batts, who's coming from Lake Eufaula. He's a guide on Lake Eufaula, and he also fishes the FLW Tour. So he's going to be talking specifically about Lake Eufaula, and we're going to do both Kaz, Lake Eufaula, and then our next guest, Bill Payne. Bill is coming from... he fishes and guides on Lake Allatoona. He guides on Lake Carter's and also Lake Blue Ridge. So he's going to speak about those lakes, probably more of a focus on Carter's and Allatoona. Maybe even a little tickle of information on Chickamauga, where he used to fish, and has some information on as well. So those 3 people, Bill Payne, Kaz Anderson, and Clayton Batts, along with the kayak angling aficionados, Christine Fisher and Clint Henderson, they're all going to be having their own breakout sessions. So we're going to start on the main stage with the 3 gyms, talking about Lanier and spring fishing. And then we're going to have a break for lunch. And then after lunch, we're going to go into the breakout session. So people will get to choose the opportunity to attend 2 of those 4 groups. So you got Kaz Anderson, Lake Chatuque, again, Clayton Batts, Eufaula, Bill Payne on Carter's and Allatoona. And then you've got the kayak anglers, Christine Fisher and Clint Henderson, talking about kayak angling and how they're going to get, or how you can be a better kayak angler. So you can choose 2 of those 4. Then we'll come back to the main stage. And then on the main stage, after the breakout sessions, this is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon now. This is an 8 to 5 program. That's something we haven't done in the past either. This is an all-day sucker. Absolutely. You're going to have something to do all day, and you're going to keep getting information all day long. We've got, and I'm excited, I just posted this on social media today. We've got Mark Daniels Jr. from Major League Fishing, and Brian Latimer is coming from the FLW side. Both outstanding anglers. And these guys, I don't know if everybody knows this, these guys just won the gold medal at the Pan American Fishing Championships up in Canada just a couple weeks ago.
Really?
So they are fresh off a big win together, even though they fish different series. Obviously, they're friends. And so we're going to have these guys on stage talking about, I'm going to have Brian touch on his Lake Seminole win on the FLW Tour last year, and help people learn, more about Seminole, and just in general, how he proceeds and progresses as a professional angler and how he breaks down lakes. Mark Daniels' background is, he came from, he fished in California, the California Delta. So he grew up, pitching and flipping and punching and that kind of stuff. But he's really become a very good finesse fisherman as well, a deep, clear water fisherman. So I'm going to have him share some of those insights, and as well as, just talk about what it takes to become a professional angler. And also, on the realistic side, the sacrifices you make to become a professional angler. It is, we've got a lot of kids today that come up in the high school range, and they go to fish in college, and they want to be professional anglers. And I think it's a wonderful goal, and I think it's outstanding. But let's hear from the pros that have been there and are successful and accomplished. What really do you give up along the way? What are the things that you've got to do? What's your mindset got to be to get to that level? Because these guys are top level pros. I mean, they're big time, and they've made it. How did they get there, and what did they sacrifice to get there? So I'm going to have them talk about that. So I think this is going to be a good draw for our high school anglers too. We're going to do, and it allows me to transition into what's next here, is the high school program that we've got. And this will also be on the main stage. It's not a breakout option. This is main stage stuff. So we really want to get our high schoolers involved. And we've got Lee Rose Koza and her brother Carter Koza. Now these two fished together as high school teammates for their high school team, and they fished and were quite successful on the high school ranks, in the time that they fished together. Now, Lee Rose was a senior last year. She graduated and accepted a scholarship to go fish for Carson Newman University in Tennessee. So she's fishing there. She also is involved heavily in running the social media campaign for St. Croix Rods. So she is going to be there talking about how she leverages social media and how these young anglers coming up, can leverage social media to establish their presence in the market and be known, if you will, and then also, in addition, leverage that presence for sponsorship opportunities, because that's really, a lot of these kids want sponsorships, and I think, a lot of folks come out now and they're like, well, give us a sponsorship, give us stuff. And that's not the right approach. That's not the way to go and lure sponsors. You've got to be able to provide them, hey, what can you do for me? And that's really the attitude that you need to approach that with is, what can I provide you that makes sense for me to be able to represent your product?
Exactly.
And she's going to talk about that. She's so good at this. She's awesome. And then Kaz is going to come back and join Carter, and they're going to talk about together. These two are both highly successful high school anglers. They have won the points championships. They have won, and I'm talking about them as a group. They don't fish together, but they fish against each other. But together in their joint accomplishments, they have won points championships. They've won tournaments. They are good. They know what to do, and I'm going to have them try to pour into our high school anglers that attend this event and just really talk about what are some of their keys to success. What have they done, and what do they do maybe a little bit differently than everybody else to achieve what they achieve? And I think what we're going to hear from them is a lot of mindset things. It's a lot of determination things. It's, some of it's about using the right bait at the right time and making the right decision. We all know that's part of bass fishing. But I think the mindset and the belief in themselves that these people have, I think, is going to be very inspirational for a high school crew. So I'm so excited for them to be able to see that. I think the high schoolers are going to love seeing MDJ and BLAT there too. They're going to love seeing those pros there and talking about, the different aspects, not just clearwater fishing, Seminole, but what it takes to be a pro. That's going to be awesome. I'm just so fired up for this event. So it's so much different this year. It's so much more expansive. It's so much more diverse than anything we've done in the past. We really know we're going to get a lot of people there. And I'm fired up to be a part of it. It is so exciting that we've just been able to grow this thing to where it is now. And by the way, the whole event is powered by Shimano. Shimano is our title sponsor, so I want to make sure to get that in there as well.
Absolutely. So is it a one-day event?
It is a one-day event, 8 to 5, January the 4th.
January the 4th.
2020. It's a Saturday morning. And again, it's the Forsyth Conference Center, which is at Lanier Tech.
Do they need to bring some pencils and some notebook paper?
We'll have a program for them when they get there, but that probably would not be a bad idea.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah, probably would not be a bad idea. We've got so many prizes and giveaways lined up. I'm going to continue on my social media pages, which is I'm at Jimbo on Lanier for Instagram and Jimbo on Lanier for Facebook. That's where I'll really be talking about some of the giveaways and the raffles and the prizes that all of our vendors and that we're going to be doing. We've got a lot of stuff to give away. We've got a lot of reason to be there aside from the information. We serve breakfast and lunch. It's going to be incredible. It's really going to be a super event and a great way to spend January 4th. I know you guys are going to get some Christmas money. We'll have vendors there with all the latest baits, Lanier baits, Castaway baits, Shimano, of course, and so many other people are going to be there with cool fishing stuff, local vendors. Georgia Blade's going to be there. I'm excited. Pam and Mike are joining us as well, and they're going to be there with their equipment and all the different baits and things that they offer, and some specials. I'm sure they'll have some show specials as well. It's going to be awesome. We're just going to have a big old day of fishing. It's going to be great.
All right, Jimbo, let me tell you something. That I have really looked forward to this podcast with you. I think you have covered a ton of stuff for our listeners.
I can talk.
You can talk, and I have made the comment that the less I talk, the better the podcast is. So I think this one's going to be excellent. I want to commend you on bringing your faith out into the public.
Sure, absolutely.
I think people of faith should do that much more than we do sometimes.
We are called to, absolutely.
So I definitely appreciate that. I appreciate your wanting to make sure your integrity, your honesty, your ability to share with your customers and everybody, that you bring that to the forefront. So that's very respectable, very commendable, especially in the fishing industry.
Thank you. Yeah. Don't always see it.
You don't always see it.
Don't always see it.
You don't always see it. And this has been kind of eye-opening for me to listen to you bring the business aspect into, what you learned out in the world, how you've brought it into that. It's been very eye-opening. That's another side that we don't get to hear very often.
Oh, good.
So
Good. Awesome.
I do appreciate that, and I hope that after you have your Geminar, we can have you back on, maybe, some lessons learned and talk about that, in the future. And
love to come back.
And I tell you what, I just appreciate you taking the time to drive all the way out here today and just give us a little bit, so it's very much appreciated. And I want to thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. You and Josh having me out here today, Danny, has been awesome. I love what you guys are doing. Let me just return the favor and say, hey, F&G has got it going on. Fish North Georgia is something that you guys need to pay attention to. You need to stay dialed into. These guys are doing great things. It's going to get better. You're going to get more information here, and it's really, like I say, as you and Danny and I were talking earlier, this partnership for us makes sense because we're both in the, hey, let's share information. Let's get more people interested in fishing. Let's get information in the hands of people that want to do this. It's, that's what it's there for. And that's why we're here.
Exactly.
Is to support in that role. And I think this is you're just another avenue for support. You're just another person, you guys are just another crew that are doing that. And it's awesome. So I was tickled to be invited. I was honored. Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Well, I can tell you when we first started this, we had, I threw out the question to a lot of friends of ours, who do you want to hear? Mm-hmm. And one answer kept coming back. It was Jimbo. I'll listen to Jimbo. So early on, we set the bar to get you to come in here. So I appreciate that today I can say that dream has been fulfilled, that we got you here. So I really do appreciate you taking your time.
Thank you, Danny. Thanks for having me.
All right, buddy.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks. Hey, guys, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Make sure you hit that subscribe button and click on that little bell so that you can get all of our future videos and podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Fish North Georgia. And we look forward to seeing you again in the future.